Hello, everyone. I promised you a story, so here's a story. There's a few stories. Here's a story from the Ben Ish Chai. It's really more of a parable than an actual story, but it's a beautiful story. It's known that there's nothing more blessed and fulfilling and human than to have children. Of course, it can be misused and etc. But children is genuine humanness. You're creating another human being. All right, the story goes like this. Once there was a king, a great king, powerful king. This was in Baghdad. And he was getting older. He decided he wanted to make some sort of a monument that would stand forever and that would make his name and his memory eternal. So his advisors told him that if he wants this building or this monument or obelisk or whatever he wants to build, if he wants it to be eternal, then the only important thing is that he has to do the following. Makes no difference if it's a building or if it's a statue or whatever. He has to find a Jewish woman that gave birth to a child in her old age. First, her only child. She's, let's say, 50, 55, whatever the only child she gave birth to, what's called Be'et Zigna. And take that child and slaughter it and put the blood in the cornerstone, mix the blood with the cornerstone, and then that will last forever. If the building for sure lasts forever. So the king looks around the hole, sends his men out, and sure enough, they find one woman. She's already in her 50s or late 50s, and she and her husband did not have children until their old age. And she has a son that's 3 years old. And he takes the son, and they make a big ceremony, and they're about to slaughter her son and and he tells her about her great merit that she's got and how they'll give her, money and they'll give her a new house and a new this, and also her son's name will be put on the plaque, and he'll also be eternal, and what a tremendous service she's doing for the country, and of course it's part of sacrifice. So she said, "Have I got the permission to speak, Your Majesty?" So she said yes. So she said, I'm very happy to be able to help the king. The king has really been generous to the Jewish people, and he's been a good king and a good ruler. But I have a big doubt about his wise men, if they're really so wise. Everybody's looking at each other. Old lady, how can she even compare to these wise men? They've been devoting their whole lives to wisdom, to the books, to the mystical writings, to this. So they're all sort of scoffing. And he said, ma'am, my wise men, they're the wisest in the world. They know astronomy, they know mathematics, they have tremendous memories, they have tremendous insight, they're philosophers. She said, well, I would like to ask them 3 questions. And if they can answer these questions properly, then with great joy and how do you say, blessing, I give my son to make the name of the king eternal. But if they can't answer the questions, then maybe it could be that they're not so smart, and it could be that the advice that they gave to the king wasn't so accurate. So the wise men, they talk, they're looking at each other and they're laughing. And the king said, but these have to be questions that you can give the answer to. There just can't be unanswerable questions. You have to answer. She said, oh, yes, Your Majesty, I'll give the right answers to the question, the correct answers to the questions. Maybe they can also give the correct answers. So the king said, okay, ask. So she said, what is the sweetest thing in the world? What is the lightest thing in the world? And what is the bitterest thing in the world? That's my question. 3 questions. The sweetest thing in the world most tasty thing in the world, the lightest thing in the world, and the most bitter thing in the world. So the wise men look at each other and they're all smiling and they're laughing. So the king said, no, can you answer? And they said, of course we can answer. The sweetest thing in the world is honey. There's a certain type of a bee that is the sweetest type of honey that there is. We happen to know of this bee. They gave the name of the bee and where it is. And this is so tremendously sweet, the honey, that you can't, honey tasty and everything. You just have to dilute it a little bit. It's tremendously tasty and sweet. Good, everybody clap. Next question, what is the lightest thing in the world? The lightest thing in the world is a feather. A feather is tremendously light. You carry a feather, no effort whatsoever. What's the most bitter thing in the world? He said the most bitter thing in the world, there happens to be this type of, what is it, bitter gall. What's it called? The tremendously bitter fruit. It's almost impossible to eat. It's so bitter. And they gave the name of the fruit, what it is, how bitter it is. And someone said, yes, it's true. It's tremendously bitter. And a little tiny bit of it wrecks the food. You can't, so bitter. So the clothes whack. So the king said, okay, ma'am, now we're going to give your son. She said, well, you wanted me to answer. Their answers are wrong. Their answers are wrong. They didn't. So they're looking at each other with evidence. So she said, I'll tell you. Okay, what did I ask first? What is the sweetest thing in the world? The sweetest thing in the world is mother's milk to a baby. You give the baby honey, the sweetest honey, the best tasting food. The best tasting, sweetest thing in the world is mother's milk to a baby. What's the lightest thing in the world? The lightest thing in the world is for a mother to carry her child, to lift her child and carry it. No matter how heavy, no matter what, and carrying her child, a feather, she'll eventually lose interest. She'll never lose interest in the child. The child is always light in her arms. What's the most bitter thing in the world? The most bitter thing in the world is if you take a child from a Jewish mother, her only child in her own age, and kill that child in front of her eyes. That's the most bitter thing in the world. The king said, looks like my wise men are not so wise after all. And they let the child live. Have a good day with Mashiach now. God willing, tomorrow there'll be classes. Story from the Ben Ish Chai, the holy Ben Ish Chai, Chacham Yosef Chaim from Baghdad. He passed away about 100 years ago.